Welcome to the Liz McMullen Show. My guest this evening is Bridget Birdsall, and she's a first time on my show, and I promise to be very kind to her. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I reside in the thriving metropolis of Madison, Wisconsin. And I've been writing for about 20 years now. It was always my dream to be a writer. I'm dyslexic, so people used to think that was quite funny that I wanted to be a writer. Mm-hmm. But I believe that books can save lives, and books saved my life. And so I write about things and people that I love. I write about experiences that are familiar to me. I write about or my friends or my family. And let's see, I have done all different kinds of things for work, but my first love is my writing.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you there. So, let's see. So, you said that you've been writing for quite some time, but you've just entered into the published zone of 2 books, or?
Yeah, I have a 23-year-old son who lives in Brooklyn, New York right now. I was raising him as he watched me write for many, many years, and I had a lot of close calls. I had an editor from FSG, Farrar, Straus and Giroux, and I was on the plane on the way to New York to meet the editor. I had been working with him for a year on this book, Double Exposure, that we're going to talk about today. And I found out that he had been fired. And so everything that I had done for that last year and a half never came to fruition with FSG. Then this book today, Double Exposure, and another book I had a 2-book contract at Front Street Press, which is a small press from North Carolina that did kind of edgy young adult books. And they came in and closed their door, and I was the first one, the first in the line to be cut. So everybody after me got cut too. So it was I just didn't make it quite through that last publishing door. And so there were all these near misses. People really liked my work. And the publishing industry, as you know, has been, just undergoing tremendous change and tumult. And so my son said to me, Mom, you've been doing this for years and years and years. You promised me you would publish a book by the time you turned 50. Uh-huh. And I said, so I'm giving away my age here. And I said, I know, but I don't think it's going to happen. He said, well, why don't you self-publish it? Mm-hmm. Because Amazon has that self-publishing thing now. Why don't you just self-publish it? So I picked one of my books. I had 3 books that I had written, and it was an autobiographical novel called Ordinary Angels. And the reason I picked that book was because I could control the distribution of it. Uh-huh. I wasn't quite sure I wanted it out in the world, but I went ahead and I did everything I knew to make that book a really strong book. I hired a book designer, and that book, when you pull it off the shelf, looks like it comes from a fine publishing house. And it's actually sold very well locally, and landed me my agent with Farrar, Straus and Giroux, because someone, actually a Newbery Award-winning author who was at my program in Vermont College, read the book and sent it to Jonathan Lyons of Farrar, Straus and Giroux, and he said he wanted to represent me, and that's how I ended up with my New York agent, and then we went on to sell this book, Double Exposure.
So give me a nice crystallized picture of Double Exposure.
Double Exposure is a story about basketball. It's a story about bullying, and it's a story about being who you really are, personal empowerment.
Mm-hmm. Alex has had from birth she's had a challenge, and what piqued my interest, because I love watching documentaries, And I've watched documentaries on intersex and how so many times if they deemed, I guess, the phallus to be too small, they would do surgery to make the child a girl. And a lot of times that was not great. And I don't know if you saw this documentary, but there were twins, and when one was being circumcised, there was an accident. And because of the damage, they decided to make him a her. And then when, puberty hit and when, he's like, my body doesn't match how I feel. And the reason why I bring up that particular story is a lot of times the intersex children have their choices made for them. And Alex's parents didn't, and that has frustrated her. But it's actually the first time I've seen in print where parents were trying their best to do right by their child and let them have personal choice.
Right, and there's a movement now afoot, even in the medical industry. Now, often they will send gender experts in, medical people, to assign a gender to a child who's born with ambiguous genitalia or an intersex condition. They're not always necessarily the same, but there's a lot of varieties in these issues. And what you're saying is exactly true, Liz. They used to believe that their life would be easier as a girl. And I am familiar with that. I didn't see the documentary. I read the book, though, about that twin who then later in life committed suicide.
He did. He found himself and he found a lover. And then that didn't work out. And he ended up taking his life. And, one of the emotional hot points that you cover is that, there's one line where, my mother knows a suicidal kid when she sees one. And, everybody within the LGBT asterisks, because there's so many other letters that are being added that we wouldn't want to leave out. Like so many of us have like like the difficulty like finding ourselves and finding our place in the world and feeling comfortable and being accepted and living our lives the way that we want to live our lives, that this extra challenge, even when his mother's trying to do right by him, doing right by her, it's still contentious.
Right. I mean, it is challenging, and I've actually met people since I've written this book. I can't even tell you how many people I have met. Now, this condition occurs in 2% of the children born in the United States, as far as we know. Some people say that percentage is higher. And, I met a girl who was actually, a very similar thing happened. She was a preemie, and there was a surgery done, and her parents were never told what the surgery was. It was just that some surgeries had to be done because she was a preemie. When she was 13 years old, she was not getting a period. She was not developing breasts. In fact, she was developing an Adam's apple, and she was starting to grow a beard. And she's, of course, freaking out. Her family's freaking out. And they go back into the medical records and find out that she was actually born intersex. And she was born without a womb. But she presented, as a girl on the outside, but she was really had the chromosome mix of a male. Mm-hmm. And later on went to live as a male. Mm-hmm. But these things do happen, and it can be very, imagine as a teenager, you just really want to fit in. You want to belong. You want to be accepted. You want friends, just like everybody else, in the world. And then if you have something that's really different about you, or that you feel you have to keep a secret, there's a lot of pressure. And, and that's why the book is also about bullying, because sometimes young people who are different end up becoming the targets of their peers.
I was a little stressed out in the beginning, and because it's in the beginning chapter, it's not going to do a spoiler. But when they pantsed her and saw, I was worried that they were gonna rape Alex. That was my, she did get beaten, but that was my worry, and things, went to black, so I didn't know what to expect.
Right, right. Yeah, and it was so interesting when I was writing the book. I really debated about starting with that chapter or not, but it's just to set up the whole idea that bullying has been a part of her life, being different and trying to avoid being bullied. That's been a part of Alex's life, and I have a personal reason. Maybe you noticed that the book is dedicated to Jeffrey. Mm-hmm. And Jeffrey is a nephew by marriage who committed suicide, took his own life on January 1st, 2012, after years and years and years of just being worn down by the bullying. Mm-hmm. So the dedication I wrote was for Jeffrey and those who have been judged or bullied for being different. In the game of life, there will be times you want to give up. Don't. Stay in the game. The world needs you now more than ever. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that's true. I think especially LGBTQI, whatever, asterisk kids, they can really be put through hell with this stuff. And the bullying can be so subtle, and it can be so relentless.
Well, I found when I was reading your book that for the first time I got to see inside the mind, well, I mean, not diminishing it, of a child. She's still young. And, going through puberty and, the violation-like experience that she had when she had to go to the surgeon because she wanted to have surgery there. And when she was being palpitated and whatnot, at one point she kind of dissociated herself and left her body. And I was like, how horrifying it must be to have that prodded or poked or examined. Like, and how do you know when some behavior is a violation and what is clinically necessary?
Right. Yeah, and I didn't shy away from medical details in the book for the very reason that I believe fiction can sometimes tell truth so well. I mean, we can tell the truth in fiction, and this is a topic not many people know much about, and there's a lot of questions about it. So I didn't want to shy away from putting in some of the medical details because it makes it really real. And there is a certain percentage of our population that deals with this in their day-to-day life.
The other thing I thought was very valuable was the internal dialogue. You got to see what was happening and what Alex's perception of how she was perceived and how people were looking to and treating her, and how estranged she was from her body. And I was thinking of this scene where, she's doing that first pickup game, and it's weird that the girls are, physical, like hugging or touching, or, even though it's very pal around, and a lot of times in women's sports we get kind of sisterhood, yeah. But for Alex, it was like, I'm not comfortable with people touching me, and it's a little weird to be, in the women's team, the girls' team and whatnot. And that kind of sensation, I felt, is that why you chose first person? Because you wanted to have the opportunity to explore the internal dialogue and how Alex was experiencing the world from a first point of view?
Yes, exactly, Liz. Yep. Exactly, because I felt like it was important to know her experience, but also to see her interactions in the world. And if you watch men and women in sports, there does tend to be a different way they relate to each other. I played women's basketball. I played at Creighton University in Division I, and I also played in high school. And there was a lot more physical intimacy with patting each other, encouraging each other physically. And so you can imagine that Alex has lived as a boy mostly being beat up by other boys. So anytime you've been through that kind of trauma, when people are touching you or poking you or patting you or even slapping you on the back, whatever, in a friendly way, when you've come from that kind of trauma, you're used to that kind of touch being a threat rather than something comforting.
Do you, I don't know how you're promoting the book, but have you been invited to do talks in schools and whatnot about someone who's born intersex and the important topics like anti-bullying and whatnot? Have you explored that?
Yes, I am. I'm also been a teacher. I've taught on high school and college, university levels, graduate school levels. I've taught writing, literature. I'm a guest artist this spring, teaching artist at Edgewood High School here in Madison, Wisconsin. I'll be teaching young people how to write plays and find their voice, mostly high school seniors. Mm-hmm. And it's through the CTM Theater here in Madison. It's a wonderful program that brings in visiting artists. So I work with young people. I'm probably going to be going back to my old high school at Brookfield Central. It's a suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and talking to some of the English classes about the book, about writing, about what the book's about. I have talk with young people and put up some. I'm getting invitations right now, so the book is only out since November.
So what are some of the things that you've done for world building in your book? Because you have Alex starting in California and taking her into the Midwest?
Yes, Milwaukee.
Right. And now I'm trying to think of region. It's like my geography.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Midwest. Sorry.
Yes, my geography is awesome. That's what happens. It's like there's the West Coast and the East Coast, then stuff happened in the beginning, in the middle of the country, which unfortunately, poor geography in my head. But the reason why I brought it up is that in order to really get the experience of what Alex is going through, you have to have your finger on the pulse of the community, from like the little things like weather and environment to accents and, whether it's a diverse community or whether there are a few people who are on the outs, and just a lot of different things going on. And do you do it consciously? Are you a planner? Is that something you cultivate?
I specifically chose Milwaukee area, not only because I grew up there, but because it tends to be a very conservative environment. It is one of the most segregated cities in the country. People don't really know that. I also wanted to make this Alex. I've always been a little bit enchanted by the south side of Milwaukee because it brings together so many different cultures. And as you look over the viaduct or the expressways that all snake around downtown, you can see over 200 churches where in the early 1900s immigrants came and settled. And so you have neighborhoods that are Irish and Polish and German and Czechoslovakian and you just have all these different melting pot of cultures.
When you're sharing that culture, when you're trying to create this environment and the setting, what sense do you tend to lean on?
Oh, what sense do I? Well,
I mean, it could be a panoply of things, but there are some times when there's like a lead sense, whether it's vision, sound,
I think it's probably smell. The smell of the lake. It smells like the sea. You can smell it. Downtown Milwaukee has a very distinct smell. It's a big brewery town. It's got the packing houses, and those make their way into the meat scraps that get fed to the fish that Grizzly has. So, it's a very working class town.
That was a wacky house, by the way.
Yeah.
Could you describe it for my listeners? Because it was kind of crazy.
Yeah, well, they live in what's called the Polish Palace. And these are really houses that you can see that line up along the expressway on the south side of Milwaukee. And when the Polish immigrants came into Milwaukee, they couldn't afford to build a house. So what they did is they built basements that had doors out the front. And then they would save their money and build the houses on top. Most of that wood and most of that was all brought up on horseback from Chicago, the stone, the wood. And, you can actually go into the history of Milwaukee and find pictures of the Polish flats. And then they would build this kind of classic-looking large home, squarish home on top with a front porch, and these all line up. You can see these Polish flats along the expressway. And so Grizzly, who is Uncle Grizzly to Alex, he works at the packing plant, and he has all these little side jobs, and he raises piranhas in the basement. And so in the basement where he's living, he has these tanks full of piranhas. And it's more of a kind of a humorous thing because Grizzly is a person who's different too. He's very, very heavy. And tattooed on his knuckles is #1 fat boy. And Grizzly is a great example for Alex because Grizzly has accepted who he is. Mm. And he accepts other people too. So he's a constant reminder to Alex about that we are all different and we are all gifts and we are all here for a reason. No matter how we were born, no matter if we are tall or short, medium, heavy, lightweight, it doesn't matter. We are all here for a reason, whether we have other abilities, whether we're really super smart, whether we're great basketball players or not. We're all here for a reason, to share something that we were created to bring to this planet.
Well, that's, very succinctly a great takeaway to have from your novel. Your next release, or what would be the topic of that one? You said you have a third novel that's not yet in print.
Right. My third novel is called Bringing Home Divine. And it's a middle grade novel. It's the story of a young girl being raised in the foothills of the Bighorn Mountains in Wyoming. And Divine, of course, is a white horse. Oh. And she wants to ride the rodeo, but she's got a problem. Her daddy, who is suddenly got religion, has decided that he doesn't want her being raised in a household with 2 women of questionable reputation.
Now that's something to keep your eyes peeled for, my listeners. I can't believe our time is coming to a close. It went zip bang. We got to our destination. But my final thoughts are, I agree with what you said earlier, that books can save lives and change lives. And for me, the book that changed my life was Stone Butch Blues by Leslie Feinberg. And it blew my mind. And when it was first written, the inscription was about a drag king. About a butch. And then the next one was about a drag king. It's like the evolution of transgender. And I think that your book would also kind of to sink in and connect, not just with us old folks who like to read books, but with young adults need to see themselves and be visible. And I think that you've made visible a part of our community that is often not seen or shamed or hidden.
Right. I consider this, Liz, a game-changing book. And I've been told that it is. And as far as I know, the young people are reading it already, at least in my area, which I'm really glad. And, the transgender issue is becoming huge now. Even here in Wisconsin, the Athletics Association in Baraboo, Wisconsin, just took on an official statement allowing young people who are transgender to choose the athletic teams they want to play on.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is so amazing.
Yep. And so it's, things are changing in our world, and a lot of the younger people who are coming up now, they're in a different world than we were, thank goodness, and yet they have their own challenges too. But they are really challenging this whole concept of what it means to be male or female or intersex, or what if you don't want to even have a gender? They're really challenging what it means in our society and our culture, and why we have gender. Is it a social construct? Is it really a physical difference? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So these are big questions, and there's a lot of amazing young people who are right on the edge of creating change around who they are and who they want to be in the world.
Well, I find it to be an extremely strong dialogue. I feel like good books, start a conversation. They're not just something that you receive. It's something that changes the way that you think, and can also change how you act in your community. I wanted to thank you for coming on my show. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Liz. I so appreciate it. Keep up the great work yourself.